Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Sammy Roth.
And I'm Rosie Murphy. This is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
This week we've got Season 2, Episode 20. It's 2 for the road. We're really getting into the home stretch here.
We've also got the second half of an interview with Mark Goldman, who worked on Lost as an editor, actually won an Emmy for his work on the show.
Let's get to the episode. So as always on The Hatch, we start with our hot takes. Rosie, what's your hot take this week?
I have a number of hot takes on this episode because a lot happens.
That's my shtick, but I'll allow it.
I'm going to start with one that is a little bit more subtle, I think. In the flashback, when we see Ana Lucia, specifically in the scene where she's driving Christian around and she stops the car and turns to him and asks, "What are we doing here?" And he, as Christian is sometimes, is just super on the nose in his assessment of himself. He says, I can't apologize to my son, even though I know he did the right thing. And he just speaks with such a clarity that, may we all be able to assess ourselves as honestly as Christian Shepherd, even though he sucks in a lot of other ways. And, unfortunately goes on to die, within a couple of days or hours of that scene. And Jack never finds out that Christian felt these things. But just very, very good at knowing who he is and why he's doing what he's doing.
Yes, and you know what? I'm with you. I fucking love Christian Shepherd, and I enjoy every time he's on screen. However, I will point out that Jack does get to find out that Christian felt that way because he also confesses it to Sawyer, who later tells Jack on the island.
Yeah.
That bar that Christian's walking into at the end there with Anna, that's the bar where he meets Sawyer. But anyway.
Right there. Sammy, what's your first hot take of what I'm sure will be many?
I got one about Ben, which is that I just got to say, as much of a master manipulator as he is, and as devious and cunning as his mind is, he gets so fucking lucky that he did not die in this episode and in a bunch of other episodes. He has been
particularly this one, though.
Particularly this one, but he also had Sawyer fired a gun at him, and Ana Lucia just managed to push Sawyer out of the way, or Sayid, excuse me, not Sawyer.
Yeah.
And then this time, Anna's pointing the gun straight at him, and he's staring down the barrel of it. He so should have died. He gets really, really lucky, and I just want to point that out. That for all of Ben's reputation, there was nothing he could have done to prevent his death on several occasions here.
Right. Well, the Sayid one was luck, I think, because Sayid actually fired the gun. Ana Lucia, decided of her own volition not to shoot, but still, I see what you're saying.
This is true, but anyway.
Still nothing to do with Ben.
Nothing to do with Ben. What? So what's your next hot take?
Oh, are we really going back and
Let's
forth?
Let's do it.
I'm going to read verbatim from my notes. Fucking hell, the Libby Hurley scene is so sweet, and she dies so quickly. Ugh, just a punch to the gut. They get to that beach, and it's really, really, really kind. And she says, "I'll just run back to the hatch real quick." And Hurley walks out on the beach, and Jin gives him a real cute thumbs up. And a needless death.
I gotta be honest, I have a hindsight about that scene, which is very different than your take, but we'll wait until the end for that.
Oh, okay. Would you like to share another take?
Sure, I'll cut in with my second hot take, and then you can do your third one. This is just a Naveen Andrews appreciation moment here. There's this very quick, but I found extremely wonderful moment between Hurley and Sayid where Hurley's telling him about the Say Anything video where the guy's got the boombox on his head, and Hurley says to him, "You should really check it out sometime." And he pauses a little. I mean, if we ever get off this island. And there's just this split second where there's this little smile creeping onto Sayid's face.
Yeah.
Where he's just Sayid is not one to show bemusement. But you see it there for just a second, the smile creeping onto his lips, and then he frowns and turns away, and that's the end of it. And I appreciated Naveen Andrews so much in that moment. I paused and went back to look at it 3 times.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, everyone should go do that. I got a screenshot, which I'll post on our Twitter account. So, Rosie, what is your third and hopefully final hot take?
Well, hopefully this can nicely segue us into the heart of this episode. But for once, everyone is right to be skeptical of Michael. John Locke is right. Ana Lucia is right. Everyone is right. And Jack is right at the beginning of the episode when he's, looking around into the woods and saying there must be others here. And Kate says, they wouldn't have just let him go, even though, of course, that's exactly what they did. But then Jack has a change of heart, seemingly. And he's willing to believe Michael's story about how the others, live in huts and they don't have any shoes and they barely have anything that could be called a fighting force. We could take them. And he was right. His assessment was so right at the beginning. And I understand, when he cares about Michael, they're part of the same community. Of course, he wants to believe him, but if only he had stayed so skeptical.
Yeah. It's really a shame, and I kind of think what's going on here is that Jack really wants blood. I mean, we've seen this building in him. He wanted to start an army earlier in the season. He
wanted to go out to the line.
Yeah,
the night before.
He's fed up and he doesn't want to take it anymore. He wants to go after the others. And so when Michael brings him this information of, they live in huts and we could take them, I think Jack's it just clicks in his mind like, yeah, let's do it. And he loses all of the skepticism.
Right. And let's go right now. Yeah. Even though, again, John is being a little more skeptical, but he's not willing to stop Jack like he has been on occasion.
No.
Which,
Man, so much happens in this episode. We just did 5 hot takes.
About 5 distinct plots. Yeah. Okay.
It does. I gotta say, I am gonna miss Ana Lucia on this show.
Oh, I know.
I forget if I said this during her last flashback episode when we talked about her, but I was not a huge Ana Lucia fan the first time through. I don't know what I was missing the first time around, but she's got all of these flaws, and she's not an especially likable human being, but she just gives so few fucks about anything.
Her flashback is troublesome in some ways, I think, but it's in a way satisfying. And in a way sad, but I think satisfying because she's often just in this. Like when she sees Christian getting, borderline violent, she once again just springs into action, and is able to interrupt that. And, you could argue that it wasn't her place, but I think that was her sort of training and her protective instinct.
Well, I kind of think that's why Christian really brought her there.
Really?
I mean, I actually think that he, even though he couldn't tell her this, wanted her there to stop him from doing anything he would regret.
Oh, that's interesting. You think he had that much foresight?
Yeah. I
guess as we've said, he knows himself very well.
He does. You said that not 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
No, that's guesswork. I mean, there's nothing in the show conclusively that shows that, but I just can't imagine what else he would really be there for, or she would really be there for. I mean, he clearly could use a drinking buddy. That's one purpose that she serves. But, he came to her room in the middle of the night and said, okay, now, this is what I brought you here for. Come with me. And I think she does her job. No, I think I agree with you that there's Ana Lucia's flashbacks in general are very troubling. And I think that it's sad. One of the reasons it's so sad she dies here is that we're still left with so many sort of deep existential unanswered questions about who she is as a person deep down.
Yeah.
We don't really ever learn more about her strained relationship with her mother and the roots of that outside of a stray comment this episode where she says, children and their parents shouldn't work together. We have been accusing her basically of just you're a killer at heart and that's what you are. And certainly by, at the end of this episode, she doesn't want to kill Ben, and she has kind of the revelation in Australia that she wants to go back home and try again.
Right.
But I just feel like we never really get a satisfying resolution to that question of is Ana Lucia just a violent person, a killer deep down? Is that the defining part of her, or is there more to her? I don't know.
Right before she dies, in the final scene with her alive in the hatch, when she's sitting on the couch and she's feeling dejected because the way she frames it is that she can't kill Ben. Like, this is something I should be able to do, and I can't. And it's like this impotence or this, like, inability to perform, you know, which is kind of I don't think she decides not to kill Ben. I think she can't. Something's holding her back. And even though, like, I think you and I and most people would say that's probably for the best, you know, killing shouldn't be something that comes easily to a person. She feels like it should. And so she does have this kind of warped or unusual sense of justice. And, you know, when Michael says, I'll do it, she hands him the gun, and it's this very intense exchange. It's all the more intense for us because, like, we know what's coming. Yes. But it feels like she's reluctant, like, not because she doesn't want Ben to die, but because she feels, like, ashamed that Michael's doing this on her behalf. And then, of course, it doesn't happen. But
that's so interesting. I think you've read that totally right. I really hadn't looked at it that way, but you're right. I think she doesn't understand what it is that is stopping her from doing it.
Right. I think something that gets under her skin is when Ben says Goodwin was a good man. You know, and she says he tried to kill me. Which, I mean, did he? Like,
no, he really didn't.
He really didn't. They were out, you know, she isolated the two of them intentionally, and confronted him, and then pretty quickly got the upper hand, when they fought.
Yeah. I wonder if it gets under her skin that Ben is saying, you know, Goodwin was convinced that, you know, Goodwin said we were wrong about you and you were a good person. Maybe that moves her somehow.
Because he already planted that scene of you're not on the list.
Right? Yeah.
Who has any idea whether this is true? Like, who knows if Goodwin was actually fighting for Ana Lucia or not?
I actually believe that part, but anyway.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think based on what we've seen of Goodwin, like, and what we know about him from later on, I don't know. I think that seems like the kind of thing Goodwin would have said. But
it's plausible.
That's neither here nor there. But it's interesting to think about the ways that perhaps that contributes to Anna's inability to pull the trigger.
Right, because maybe she's starting to feel like, you know, a little bit of guilty about that. If she had, you know, previously felt like it was this very just act, just like I think she felt like her killing of who shot her.
Oh gosh, I forget the guy's name.
When she was a police officer. She feels like that was just as well. And maybe Ben is cracking that foundation a little bit. That's all I got.
But we'll never know because she's dead.
This, I think, gosh, we're only 2 seasons in, so I don't want to commit to this, but this might be the most shocking death on Lost.
Ooh. In
terms of just straight up shock value. Like, there's no music. It's incredibly sudden. Even after Ana Lucia dies, Libby enters the frame and gets shot in a matter of seconds. It just all happens really fast, and there's no build-up at all. Gosh, yeah, and while we're on the subject
of death.
Poor Michael.
Oh.
And I guess, okay. I mean, I know he didn't, his mission was to get Ben out. It wasn't to kill anybody. But just the degree of, like, obsession and almost madness in his focus on getting Walt back is, like, really unnerving.
It is. It's extremely unnerving. I mean, Harold Perrineau, I would also want to add, like, he just totally kills it in that last scene. Oh my gosh, and he's looking down at the gun, just like, and you can see it in his eyes, like, I can't believe I'm about to do this. Right. I understand why he does what he does. I feel no sympathy for him. Like, right. I don't care what pressure he's under, what's going on with his son. Like, I can't sympathize with what he does, but I get it. Right. In a weird way.
Right. Again, sort of a warped sense of justice. In terms of the only thing that matters is reuniting with my son, and, at great cost, at great sort of cost to his psyche.
Yeah.
Do you want to return to your thought about Libby?
Oh yes, my hindsight that I foreshadowed.
Yeah.
So what I was referencing earlier about Libby is that, the last moment between them, like, yes, it's definitely sweet in a lot of ways. Like, I don't disagree with you about that. But the last part where Hurley has to go and be, like, referenced, like, oh, maybe I'll remember where I knew you from somewhere.
Yeah. And Libby gives him a real weird smile.
Yeah, which that look on Libby's face, like, so makes me think, like, Libby knows what's going on here. She remembers him from the institution or mental hospital. It's like, and then for Libby to go and get killed and for that to never be resolved. Like, I watched that moment and I just felt like really not upset, just profoundly unsatisfied. Like, really, they're gonna leave it there on that juicy, mystery of what is the connection between them and what was Libby doing there, and she clearly knows what's going on, and then they're gonna kill her. Come on.
Having just introduced that like 2 episodes ago, and when Lost like picks up a mystery that quickly, it usually becomes something like kind of big.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also got the heebie-jeebies from that.
And it's not like they didn't know they were going to kill Libby in that moment, because it's the same goddamn episode.
Because they had written the whole damn script.
I know, because they just have not done that line, or at least not asked her to make that face.
Right. If they had not done that line, it would have just been pure and simple and still very heartbreaking.
Yes.
But pure. Yeah.
It's... The last part of season 2 here is very, very good.
Oh, it is so good.
I mean, the way it's been building the drama all year between Jack and Locke, and the different threads of the Button and Ben and Walt and Michael, and how it's all going to come, crashing down in a few weeks. It's really brilliant.
I can't wait.
Me too. I think the season 2 finale might be my favorite episode of the show.
Ooh.
But
a bold claim. We'll test that in a couple
I'll save that
weeks.
hot take, yeah.
In the meantime, shall we hear from Mark Goldman?
Yeah, let's hear from Mark. You may remember him from earlier in the season. We did part 1 of this episode way back in interviewing way back in episode 5 or 6. He was one of the editors on Lost, so actually in the editing room, cutting together the footage, putting together the actual episodes. He was nominated for 4 Emmys for his work on Lost, single camera picture editing. He won for the finale of the show. And he's just got a really unique perspective on putting Lost together.
Yeah, and one of the people who remains, I think, of all the people we've talked to, super, super excited about talking about Lost. Not that everybody's not, but Mark in particular.
I've got to imagine that even though you weren't editing every episode, that you were following along with the whole show, right? Like, you knew what was...
Oh, absolutely. What was fun for me, where I got to... when I would experience what the viewers experience was when a new script came out. And I read it pretty quickly. Because usually I'm like, I want to know what the hell happens. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to find out what happens. But at some point, somebody says to Hurley, I guess Hurley says who he is. They were on the Oceanic flight, and I can't remember who it is. Somebody says to him, "That can't be. They found your plane. All your bodies are inside."
That's Naomi, who parachutes onto the island from the freighter. Season 3.
It was Naomi. Right. And the last line of the script is Hurley going, "What?" And when I read the script and I read what she said, I did exactly what every viewer did. I went, "What?" And then I read Hurley's line. And he goes, "What?" And it's like question mark, end of script. There's nothing else. And needless to say, when the next script came out, I'm like, okay, I got to find out what the hell happens next. So that was when I got to have the pleasure of like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
I certainly don't want to ask you to say anything negative about any of the other shows you've worked on, but I am curious, how the experience of Lost, compared to other shows you've worked on in terms of the scripts you were getting and the kinds of choices you were able to make about the show.
Here's the thing: the 3 shows that I've spent most of my career on, that I've spent, if I'm counting correctly, 18 seasons. So help me, God. I don't feel that old, but that sounds like an old editor who worked on 18 seasons. I've been really lucky. Angel, Lost, Once Upon a Time. They all were fun. And the thing I loved about all of them is they weren't one note. I mean, it wasn't... what I loved about Angel was, which I think was the purest case of this, they would have a show that would be silly and, you know, what you would expect a show for teenagers about a vampire to be about. It would be fun, but, you know, kind of silly and frivolous. And then you'd have a show which was an adventure, you know, where they're fighting a demon, something like that. It was a real thrilling adventure. And then the following episode, you'd do an episode that was really emotional and romantic, and it was all about the characters, and you know, you went along with it. And it was, the variety was so much fun. And Lost was less sort of that broad, like, you know, this week's episode is silly, this week's episode is fun. There's some of that. I mean, Hurley's episodes, where, you know, when you got to see his mother and all, they were sort of, they had like more of a comedic element to it, so they were perhaps different than a lot of the other episodes. But even within the episodes, you know, you have tense moments, and you have, you know, Locke and you know what I was struck by was the scene between Jack and Kate when she says to him, it's the scene in which she tells him, by the way, I'm going down the hatch too. And I had forgotten just how much sexual tension there still was at that point in the show. You know, that's sort of that will they, won't they at the beginning of season 2. They were still unsure of each other. It was a great moment. It's very different than the moment when Hurley's like saying to Locke, why did you light that fuse? And he says, why wouldn't I? And he says, oh, I don't know, because I was running up saying, don't light it, don't light it. You know, there within the episode, there's like moments that shift in tone, and then of course the same thing happened in Once Upon a Time.
Well, I definitely was curious about that, because the thing that I guess occurred to me with Lost is, you know, even if you're not getting like wildly different tone from week to week, that still within the episode, I guess the constant is the purest distillation of this, but like where you go back and forth really fast between these like ridiculous sci-fi moments and, you know, really, you know, emotional, sort of more human-based scenes. I guess I was just curious, like, if that creates challenges for you as an editor when you have scenes like, you know, Desmond and Penny on the phone, and it's simultaneously this crazy sci-fi thing, but also like one of the most emotional moments on the TV show. Okay.
No, the challenge may come from making the scene its best. I mean, obviously that phone call, you know, I put a lot of work into that phone call, but the reason it's not hard is because you treat it sincerely. You don't treat it like a joke. You know, the moment I just mentioned of Hurley saying, why'd you light it? When I was running up saying, don't light it, don't light it. And Locke goes, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you know, they act it. They don't act it big and broad. they don't. It's not like Hurley turned into Seinfeld and went, "Why were you lighting that when I told you not to light it?" I mean, he was like, "Dude, why did you do it?" And and when we're cutting a scene, it's like I'm cutting the scene the same way, whether it's two people in a room being reunited, or whether it's two people, reaching across time. You cut it so that the audience is hopefully experiencing what Desmond is going through emotionally, and whether it's sci-fi or not. And certainly, the flashbacks in most of the shows, they were great in that the way they revealed a little more about a character, which told you something about the scene you had just seen on the island, and you just kind of you cut it sincerely. You go for the emotion. You sort of you cut. Jack is on the island. Locke says, "Why don't you want to go down there, Jack?" And he just sort of stares at him, and you play that ambiguity, and then you cut to Jack coming into an ER, and you play that scene, and you allow. I mean, it's probably trickier when the writers are blocking out the story. They probably have to think, okay, we're going to go from this on the island to a scene in an emergency room. Is that going to work? Is that going to feel weird? But once they've figured that out, and it's in the script, then it actually, I mean, it helps me in that it makes it more interesting, I think.
So what were the kinds of and this is a very broad question, so feel free to go where you will. But what were the kinds of challenges that you faced with Lost that were unique to Lost, if any?
It was very big. It's a big show, and it had a lot going on. It had a lot of emotion. They shot a lot of material. That was good stuff. Jack Bender would give me lots of good material. And so there was lots to play with in finding the best way to do it. The simplistic way of putting it is there's a lot of footage. And the problem is not that it takes a long time to go through. It's that you have lots of ways. It's not a jigsaw puzzle where there's one right way and you're just trying to figure out which is the right way to put it together. It is a jigsaw puzzle which has 1,000 ways that it could all go together. And it's a question of which one is the best. Here's an example. One of my favorite scenes was the scene where Michael Emerson, who we thought, we either thought he was Henry Gale, or maybe we knew he wasn't Henry Gale, but we didn't know that he was one of the others. They finally let him come out and they give him some cereal.
The "You Guys Got Any Milk" scene.
And
yeah,
exactly, the one "You Got Any Milk." Okay. The main reason I loved it was because I knew Michael Emerson was good. I had no idea until I saw the dailies for that scene. And I was so excited when I saw him. I could have just taken one of his takes and I could have cut off the beginning and the end and stayed on him and played it all on him without cutting to Jack or Locke. It would have been great television. But, you have to cut away a little bit. And he did do a couple takes, and it's like, he's all been all beat up, and he's like, "Good Lord, what are you guys doing to me? Whoa, what is all this computer stuff? Aren't you curious? That's weird." And then he says, "Now what would I do if I were one of these people?" And he eats a bit of Rice Krispies, And playing. So it's like, do I stay on him? Do I cut to Jack? Do I cut to Locke? Do I cut to a 2-shot of them? Do I cut to close-ups? There's no obvious way to do it, and that's a case where it's a very straightforward scene. There's only one person talking, right? The other two don't say anything, and working on the rhythm. Like I worked so hard. I spent an hour playing with both how much of a beat to put in before he says, "Got any milk?" And also how long to linger, even more so, how long to linger on him after he says that line, and then before we bang in with the lost card. You playing with frames. I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. What do? I add 3 frames, and I'm like, are we sitting on him too long when we bring the bang of the lost card? Or do you have him say, "Got any milk?" Bang. Is that too soon? And you're looking for that length of time where you're going, "Got any milk?" Beat, bang. And so there's a boring little micro.
I'm not bored at all. I'm fascinated.
And so when you ask, what are the challenges? The challenges, whether for that or for the Penny Desmond phone scene, or the moment when Jack is in Man of Science, when Jack suddenly is startled by the music, and you cut to him looking around, trying to figure out what's going on, and then bringing in Locke and making that have a little bit of a jolt. It's the challenges of any editing, which is to make sure it's as engaging as possible and make sure the fun of the script is all there.
So on the topic of emotional engagement, I'll ask you now the question that I ask everybody.
Nice segue, by the way.
Well, tell me that after you hear the question.
Segue. Oh, well.
No, I ask everyone this, and for you, maybe it's not a, maybe it's an easy question because you were nominated for an Emmy, or won the Emmy for the finale of the show, but I ask everyone, what was your opinion of the finale?
I loved the finale. What I had an advantage over what most viewers would have had, and that is I watched it more than once. And while everybody listening to this, I'm sure, has seen it more than once. What I would always tell people, or I guess if somebody is like, "Oh, that finale, though, what was that all about?" My immediate response is, "Have you seen it more than once?" And if they're like, "Yeah, I see it 4 times. It's terrible," then I'm like, "Okay, you didn't like it." But often it's like, "Yeah, I've only seen it once," and I say, "Give it another try," because, and I can't explain why it is, but the finale I found got stronger and stronger each time I watched it. Now the first, I had read the script, so I knew what was happening, and then you see pieces coming in, so it's not like I experienced the first time the way everybody else experienced watching it the first time. What I did experience, though, was cutting the scene between Jack and his father, which was, there are many scenes that I would include in I can't pick one scene that's my favorite, but I do have a big collection of scenes that are my favorite, and absolutely it was one of the most emotional experiences of cutting a scene that I've ever had. The scene was not in the script that was handed out. It was like there was a space, I think scene to come, and because they didn't want any of the finale getting out. They really didn't.
Yeah, that
want
seems the key of the whole game.
Out. Yeah, and it was like a day or two beforehand. I finally saw the script of the scene, and I read it, and we had 4 editors working on this finale, and I read that scene, and I knew they were shooting it that day, and I got my ass in early the next morning so I could grab that scene to cut it, because I knew it was going to be awesome, and I wanted to cut that scene. So I made sure I was there first.
Good call.
To get a hold of the dailies. It was, it was so. I mean, just talking about it, it chokes me up. The moment when Jack's father consoles Jack, who is sad because he died. Not that his father died, because Jack died. It's like such a raw moment for unless you have no fear of death whatsoever. But I think if if you're like all gung ho to meet your maker, it may be
I
different
fear
experience.
death. I'm with you.
But for those of us who are like would sort of rather stick around for a long time, even though I certainly am not worried about it being an unpleasant thing or a painful thing, still it's a sad thing. And the idea of your father who has died before you consoling you now, and it's much more interesting than there's an afterlife. Your dad, you're here, Dad. It's all great. It's like he cries for loss, and when his dad says it's okay, it is very comforting. I get choked up to this day just talking about it. It was a brilliant moment that the writers came up with. Astounding to have Jack realize I'm dead, and to start crying, and to have his father console him. I don't know how they did it, and I've never seen anything like it in any other moment of the afterlife.
And you were a part of it. You edited the scene.
And I edited the scene, and Matthew Fox, let me tell you, he was astounding in that scene. And when he cried, it was different than any other time he's cried. He was really great, and I just can't give him enough credit for bringing that scene all the way to where it needed to be. And there's not a lot of fancy cutting, if any, in there, but that's the kind of scene I love, is one that's so emotionally engorged. It's so. And the reason I went off on this tangent is, I knew that scene was great, and I was really excited about it before the whole thing was put together. I cut the very end of it, which took a while to get good.
You mean the sequence in the church where they're all hugging and shaking? Yeah.
Yes, the cutting back and forth. There's a great case where the rhythm, we were cutting back and forth between the church and Jack on the island. The rhythm of the scene was wrong. It was happening too soon. And they actually said, you know what, we talked about it. We're like, we need a little more here. And they called Jack Bender and said, can you get us some more footage? And he and Matthew Fox went back out into the woods, and Matthew stumbled around again, and he got more great stuff. And that's when he got the the shot of it's a shot of the ground, and Jack's foot steps into it, and I had the sequence as it was. Jack's in the church, and he sees everybody, kind of smiles, and he looks down, and he takes a step, and I don't remember what I cut to then, but when I saw the dailies and I saw this shot of the foot stepping in, I'm like, I got it. Jack's going to look down in the church, take a step, we're then going to cut down and see the foot land in rhythm as if he was stepping into the church. But it's
right,
going to be
and that's where he's staggering towards
and
his death on the island, right? Okay.
Exactly. And when I saw the shot, I was like, thank you, Jack Bender. Because it's not like I thought about it. It's not like I thought, hey, let's get a shot where this is happening. I mean, he just on his own came up with it. But I saw it, and it like hit me. And I'm like, and in that moment I knew it was going to be okay. And I knew the end would be emotional. So I've always found, it emotional in parts. Then you put it all together. And like I said, I didn't experience it like somebody who was like, what the hell's going on? What's happening? But the fact is, the more we watched it, the more emotional we in the editing room got. I remember, so we watched the last act, and we thought it was good, but there was more work to be done. It's not like the editors and the producers were all sitting around bawling their eyes out, but and we kept working on it. And as time went on, each one of us had a moment where all of a sudden it would hit. I'll tell you a very personal story. Damon and I were working on, the two of us together, on the scene between Jack and his dad. Mind you, at this point we had seen the whole last act many times. And so I didn't realize it was building up. And we started we each lost our dads in our teen years. And we started talking about that and, within the context of this scene. And we talked for about 5 minutes. And then he's like, okay, you got some notes to do. And he got up and I'm like, yeah, let me get into these. And he left. And I turned around and I started to make the changes. And about 20 seconds after I started making changes, I suddenly burst into tears. And was like crying hard like I hadn't in years. And I'm like going, what is going on? But it was like there's something about those scenes. The more you see them, the deeper they get into you, and the more emotional I found they became. A few days later, Steve Semmel was showing a couple of the studio people the cut. And, Steve had seen it lots of times. But with these two new people, they got very emotional. And Steve was like, by the end, I was sobbing. And it was like, there was something about, and other, the other editors too had similar experiences. It's like, it didn't, the full impact didn't hit us right away. And so what I say to people who were like, that finale was stupid, is watch it again.
I just think that he articulates so well what is so powerful about those moments.
Yeah.
And I just also came away with such an appreciation. He talked about his work on the Jack Christian scene and the Jack stumbling around in the jungle at the end, and the "you guys got any milk" scene. And it's like, so much of what we think about when we watch that is the performances of the actors and the dialogue,
right.
and the traditional things that you that you recognize about TV, and it's just really fun to realize talking to Mark that he said he could have just left the cut on Ben for 2 whole minutes and you guys got any milk and it still would have been good, but that so much of what what makes these scenes really sparkle is the work that people end up doing afterwards, behind the scenes, putting the shots together and having it hold for just the right amount of time. I was riveted by that.
Right.
We should say, we always ask our interview guests, what are you working on now? And I spoke to Mark several months ago, at which point it wasn't clear what he was going to be working on next after Once Upon a Time ended. But I caught up with him this week, and he is now working on season 2 of Carlton Cuse's new show, Jack Ryan. So if you want to see Mark's work, that is where you can find him now.
As we mentioned earlier, we are getting into the final weeks here of season 2, which is exciting because there is a lot to talk about. Next week we have the episode titled Question Mark. I believe is it a Mr. Echo episode?
It is a Mr. Echo episode.
Delightful. And we will also be hearing again, we're kind of bookending our season here with some interviews that we did way back a few months ago. This one's with Francois Chow,
who plays Dr. Pierre Chang. In the meantime, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to The Hatch. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, all of the other podcast apps. We love it when you rate and review the show. It makes us feel good. It helps other people find it.
You can also, should you want to talk to us or talk to some other folks who listen, you can find us at facebook.com/thehatchpodcast or on Twitter @thehatchpodcast.
Our cover art is by Danny Roth. That is my brother, by the way, in case anyone ever wonders that. And our theme music...
Have we ever said that before?
I don't know. But now the secret is out. Danny Roth happens to be related to Sammy Roth.
Oh, thank you, Danny.
And our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, who is not related to either of us.
Talk to you next week.
Namaste.